So you build and install a car audio system into a vehicle and you turn it on for the first time and you're just not impressed. The subwoofer bass performance is lacking and the mid bass from our speakers is just not as punchy as what we were hoping for. If you've ever been in this position, it is not a good feeling, but not to worry, my friend, because in this video we're going to talk about 4 different mistakes that are often made that lead to poor bass performance. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to give you some bonus tips for how you can add more bass once you make sure that you didn't make any of those 4 mistakes. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Car Audio Fabrication. My name is Mark and I'd like to welcome you to this channel where we do car audio reviews and build log videos and lessons like this video, because I truly believe that when we design, build, and install a car audio system the correct way, we can really experience and feel the music rather than just listening to it. So mistake number 1, wiring issues. It's really important that when we're finishing up our install and making the connections from the wires to the actual speakers, we want to double check and make sure that similar speakers have the same polarity. In other words, let's say that we have our 6.5-inch speakers up front that are going to be providing our mid bass. We want to make sure that both of those 6.5-inch speakers on each side have the positive wire on the positive terminal and negative on the negative terminal. Now the same goes for our subwoofers. If we have multiple subwoofers, we want to make sure that they are also wired in correct polarity. The reason for this is if you have one speaker that is going out while the other one is coming in, the speakers are going to be working against each other. They're not going to be compressing air and building upon it to create acoustical energy. Now maybe you have poor bass performance and you know for a fact that you've connected the correct wires to each terminal on the speakers. Something else that you want to verify is you want to make sure that wherever you're getting that signal from, that it is wired with the correct polarity as well. As an example, say that you installed a line output converter and that you tapped in to the rear speakers of the vehicle. You would want to make sure that with that line output converter that you connected the positive leads to the positive wires and didn't have them opposite from the left to right side. Otherwise, you could have polarity issues. Let's say that you check the speaker terminals, you know they're correct, and you've checked your wiring on something like an integration piece, like a line output converter, and you know it's correct. There's still one more thing that could be wrong. The speaker may be wired incorrectly from the factory. This seems crazy, but I've actually seen it happen quite often where the terminals, the positive and negative terminals on the speaker, will just be labeled incorrectly. So ultimately, the best way to really check polarity is you can use a polarity test tool. This tool that I'm showing on screen allows you to simply hold the device close to the speakers and it fires off a series of pulses. So what you can do is you can use this little device to check all your different speakers and make sure that they are all wired correctly in the same polarity. A link to that device is down in the video description. So let's say that you check all that, you know that everything is good to go polarity-wise. Mistake number 2 that can be made is phase issues. A common example setup that we can use for a car audio system is something where we had a subwoofer playing frequencies from, let's say, 20 hertz all the way up to 80 hertz. And then let's say from 80 hertz, we hand it off to a 6.5-inch component. Issues with phase can arise in that handoff transition from the subwoofer to the speaker. This is because the subwoofer and the speaker will be located in different locations within your vehicle. Let's say that both the subwoofer and the speaker are playing 80 hertz. Our goal is to be at a listening position that those waves work together, not that they work against each other and cancel each other out. So there's a couple quick solutions to see if you're having phase issues. One of the first and easiest solutions is to actually flip the polarity on the subwoofer or on your speakers. Generally, it's going to be easier to just flip it on the subwoofer because a lot of subwoofer amplifiers have what they call a phase switch where you can flip it 180 degrees out of phase. Now, yes, at the beginning of the video, I talked about having everything wired in the correct polarity, but it's only important for like speakers. In other words, the subwoofer and the speakers don't necessarily have to be wired in the same polarity. It's okay to have them in different polarity because because it might help correct your phase issues, because when you switch the subwoofer 180 degrees out of phase, it might correct the issues that you're experiencing with lack of bass. Another solution is you can move the subwoofer around within the vehicle before you permanently install it in order to test and make sure that you don't have any phase cancellation issues. Ultimately though, one of the best solutions is to have a digital signal processor where you can actually delay the front speakers so that the sound that is furthest from you at the subwoofer, when that finally arrives to you, you can delay the front speakers to then deliver that sound from them at the same time. This functionality of a digital signal processor is called time alignment, and ultimately it's going to be the best solution for you, but a DSP can be expensive, so it might be easier to try flipping the polarity on the subwoofer or moving the subwoofer box around first. If you'd like to check out one of my other videos that I did more in detail on what a DSP is, you can check out this video here on screen. Now, mistake number 3, subwoofer enclosure type and construction along with installation of speakers. Let's say as an example that you have a sealed subwoofer box installed in your vehicle and you find that you're not quite getting enough bass, you might want to consider another subwoofer box type. You'll find that a ported subwoofer box will generally have more output, but it's important to consider that every subwoofer has a different range of variables that affect how it actually responds and plays music. As an example, let's say that we take a ported subwoofer enclosure, let's just say it's 1 cubic feet tuned to 32 hertz, and let's say that we put 2 different 10-inch subwoofers in it. We know that we're going to get different sound from each of these 2 different subwoofers. This is why prior to building and installing our subwoofer box, we should consider what the frequency response will look like for the subwoofer that we'll be using. Now, it's also very important for our bass performance to consider the volume that is required for a subwoofer. If you install a large subwoofer into a space that is far too small for it, the subwoofer isn't going to perform to its optimal capability. In one of my previous videos, I talk about how you can estimate what your box volume will actually be after all displacements for something like a ported subwoofer box. You can check that out here on screen. Now, let's say that you're confident within your subwoofer box type. Something else that you're going to want to consider is the construction of the subwoofer box. One of the biggest issues that I always see is when a subwoofer box isn't sealed well. And this goes for ported subwoofer enclosures also. The only way that air should be able to come in and out of a subwoofer box is through a port. And obviously, if it's a sealed box, it shouldn't be able to come in and out at all. It's really important to make sure during the construction phase that all of your cuts are extremely straight and accurate. And if they're not, it's important that when you're actually building the box that you use plenty of caulk in order to seal up all of the corners. Next, it's important to make sure that your box is properly braced. If you have a very powerful subwoofer within a box where all of the walls of the box can easily compress and flex, then you're going to lose out on a lot of acoustical energy, and that means that you're losing out on output. To alleviate this problem, you should have bracing. Another important thing to verify is more on the installation side of subwoofer boxes. You want to make sure that they are fully secured within the vehicle. Properly securing the box to the vehicle makes the box much more stout, and it makes it so that you're not losing any of that acoustic energy, which means, again, more output. Now, on the speaker side of things and getting good mid-bass, it's also equally important that we consider our installation. Something else that's really nice to add is these foam rings. These rings help to bridge the gap so that it directs all of the sound through the hole within your door panel. The reason that's important is if you have the sound bouncing around inside the door panel, it can actually cancel out a lot of your mid-bass performance. For a full video about that and making custom speaker adapters in order to make sure that you get the best mid-bass performance, again, video on screen. Now finally, mistake number 4. Poor system design. It's really important that when we select all of the different gear for our car audio build, that we properly match the different items. Your amplifier's output power and watts RMS should closely match the capability of the subwoofer that you're purchasing. As an example, let's say that you're using a subwoofer that is super beefy, it's super strong, it can handle a ton of power, and you're using just a moderately powered amplifier, you're not going to be powering that subwoofer to its full potential. And actually, the amplifier is going to have a hard time moving this big, beefy subwoofer. So you're going to have reduced performance compared to if you just had a matching subwoofer. Now, let's say you have an amplifier that's much more powerful than what the subwoofer can handle, although you're going to be able to power the subwoofer to its full potential, you're leaving opportunity within your amplifier. You could have had more output. Something else that often gets ignored is you have to remember that it takes power to make power. You can't buy a 10,000 watt RMS amplifier and install it into a little car, something like a Honda Civic, without upgrading the electrical system. It's important to have a big enough power plant within your system, and in this case, that's the alternator. We want to look into something like an upgraded aftermarket alternator if we're going to be using a huge amplifier. We also want to make sure that our power delivery system, the wires, is also upgraded in order to handle this increased power. I want to go into more detail on this in a future video, so if that's something you're interested in, let me know. So that's the 4 mistakes, but what are a couple of easy ways that if we check all those off the list, we make sure everything's good? What's a couple other ways that we could add bass if we're just not impressed with what we have? Well, in my opinion, one of the most efficient ways to add more bass is to add more cone area. As an example, let's say that you have a 10-inch subwoofer and it's just not performing to what you would hope it would be, and you have the room to potentially add a second 10-inch subwoofer. Well, that's gonna be more cone area, so you're gonna have more bass. So as long as you have more room and you can also power that second speaker, you're going to have more bass. Now let's say that you only have enough room for 110. What could you do? Well, you're gonna wanna look for more excursion. Excursion is how far a subwoofer or speaker actually moves in and out. If we get an upgraded subwoofer that's still a 10-inch, but it has more excursion, we're going to get more bass. Also, if we're upgrading that subwoofer, we're probably gonna have more power handling capability within the subwoofer. We can feed it more power, and we can have more bass. So there we have it. I'm wondering, how many of you guys actually make it all the way to the end of these videos? I know that this stuff can seem a little bit monotonous, but it is super important for really getting the best performance out of your car audio system. A special thanks goes out to John, Brian, Ali, Jerry, EJ, Emmanuel, Truman, James, and Colin, along with the rest of the Patreon support team. A huge thanks to those guys for helping contribute and crowdfund the making of these videos. More videos on screen. As always, thank you for watching. You guys rock. I'll talk to you soon.